Okay, folks, gang, peoples, ladies, gentlemen, rednecks, white collars, all of you. We gotta fit that bad boy onto this Vanguard before it can go in the 7117. Check out my new my bottle koozie. I'm styling with a tuxedo. That's the stuff right there. Gotta love this October weather, due to get up to 80 degrees today. Alright, so I gotta pull the shroud off, pull the cage off, back that nut off, take the other two nuts off, and mount this thusly, and then cut the grate so that this slides inside as tight as I can get it, so that we don't get any debris blow by coming through it. So I guess it's time to start turning wrenches. We're going to go ahead and turn wrenches. Thing off there. Hey! How about that? Okay, gang. Last we left off, we needed to get some Allen head bolts that would work with the adapter. Went to my local Fastenal. They had to order him, which put me behind yet another day. It is Thursday, so we started out with these guys that were holding the blower housing and stabilizer ring on. Well, obviously these were not going to work because I couldn't get a wrench on them once they were in there. So then I found these, which is the right thread, but way too short. So then I found a longer one. It was still too short, so we had to order the new ones. We got the new ones in. These guys we do not need any longer. These now go into the parts bin. And looking at them, they are, let me look at the package. They are not metric, so that's the thing. This engine was made overseas. Briggs, yeah, brilliant guys, thanks a lot. But still, very good engines. Some of the bolts are metric, some of the bolts are standard. It's a mix mash. It's crazy. And the Phillips head screws that are holding the coils down are JIS screws. They've got a little dot on them. Any Japanese industrial standard Phillips head is going to have a little dot in the head of the screw. And I don't think I can get close enough for you guys to see it, but you're just going to have to take my word for it. So it's a mix mash. You've got some JIS parts, some metric, some standard. It's like climbing into an old Chevy Cavalier with a 2.8 liter, and that 2.8 liter has half standard and half metric. Same thing with Old Blue and Clifford. Keep trying to force that metric stuff down our throats. But I digress. We got the bolts. The bolts are right here. I had to buy a pack of 5, but that's fine. You can always find another use for them. They're still black oxide coated, so I don't have to worry about rust. We will be needing to put a little bit, just a little bit, of thread locker. So we're going to use the thread locker blue on these threads, because we will not be putting lock washers on these. We're just going to run these straight in with the thread locker, and that will hold that collar down good and firm. So now, since this has to be on, it has to be stabilized with this ring, this is taking the place of that stabilization. It covers everything. So we no longer need that piece. so we can drop our bolts in. And I want to drop my bolts in before, make sure I'm getting it in the right hole. You got to be sure you get it in the right hole. Okay, I've got the 2 bolts sticking up there. I'm going to put a little bit of that thread locker on each of those bolts and get this ran on, and then it is completely affixed to the flywheel. This thread locker will release, so we don't have to worry about that. This is a Permatex brand. I use both Permatex and Loctite, but again, I digress. If I hold my tongue right, just a little dollop will do you. And shame on me, I did shake it a little bit, but I didn't shake it enough. It's a little clumpy, but it should still hold just fine. They put a little bit of that on, and we get it up there. And we're putting these 2 in first, so that it'll pretty well center things. And then we can run the flywheel nut in after that. So let's just get these 2 guys started, get them to where they're starting to seat. And before we torque it down, we'll put the flywheel nut on. And the flywheel nut and these 2 bolts that I just put in are all 3 holding this adapter in place. So we are good and secure. No chance of that sucker coming off, especially with that little bit of thread locker on there. And like I say, if you have to pull it off, you can. I'm not going to use thread locker in here. I'm not going to use thread locker on that. There is no need to. Now this is going to be tightening down against aluminum versus tightening down against the steel like it was before. So I don't know if you guys remember when I was doing the carburetor, how I would say you turn that brass screw until you hear it creak. Well, we kind of sort of want to do the same thing here. We want to make sure that we run this down to the point where we hear a little bit of creaking between the 2 metals. The 2 metals are going to argue with one another, and so it'll make a little bit of a different sound. So hopefully by using the dead blow hammer here to tighten that down, we'll be able to hear a little bit of that creaking. Probably not though. Let me see if I can do a little bit just by hand. Yeah, we can't really hear much of it. But you essentially want to be sure that you get that good and tight, because you do. Now, I never did take the flywheel off, so it is still seated in the same spot that it was originally. So I don't have to worry about making sure I've got the flywheel seated and tighten that nut down just crazy tight so that I won't shear the flywheel key, because I never took the flywheel off, so we don't have that to worry about. There, I heard a little bit. Okay, I can, if I want, come out of there, come in and put my impact on it, which we'll go ahead and do just because we can, and see if it turns any. You guys can't see it, but I'm going to watch the hole right here and see if it turns any more. Nope, no more turning, no more turning. So fortunately, I had a socket that had a short enough or narrow enough shoulder, because if you guys remember, the shoulder was way too big on that to fit in there. But Sean, your adapter's mounted. Only one more thing to do with the engine before we're ready to extract the other engine and put this engine in, and that quite simply is to make sure that you don't get a bunch of goblins coming in around there. So this will get cut out, and I'll make it as close as I can. I may even try to flare it a little so that it's kind of a press fit on. You guys will see what I'm talking about after I get it done. But first I'm going to straighten it out a little bit better than what I did just with my fingers the other day. And as soon as I get that done, all I'm going to do is just come in and nip it to make the hole. and then I'll nip a couple of lines in it so that I can see how this metal's folded back. Well, I'm going to try to do the same thing here, so I've got 3 or 4 spots that are flared so that when I push it on here, it's going to remain good, tight, and rigid and not rely on just the screws to hold it in place. And also to deter any crap from getting in and through there, because this doesn't have the secondary booster fan on it, which also has a second screen. So just a single screen, but it's a nice tight knit screen. So you guys stay tuned. As soon as I get this done, get it all buttoned back up, get it back to where it's looking like a complete engine, we'll pop the camera back on and show you guys finished product. So hang on. Okay, we fast forwarded through modifying that. This is the piece we cut out, and you can see I left a flat here, a flat here, a flat here, and a flat here, so that when I pressed this on, formed it on there, I would have an overlap. Let me show you here. Kind of like the old-timey engines would have been done. So, the A-team, as far as that goes, we've got that ready. Now we have to turn our attention to the tractor itself, get that motor out. We can go ahead at that point and set this one in place, make sure that we're good height-wise, up and down, as well as side to side. And I think I did an engine installation and alignment video on the older tractors. The same thing holds true with this one. Since I will not be messing with the entire drive shaft, I will still loosen the yoke. Hang on. Okay. Here is a drive shaft. This is the end that will attach to this plate here, just like that. This end is the yoke that attaches to the bevel gearbox. I will still be loosening this so that I have that forward to back motion, as well as being able to let the engine and this yoke self-center itself. So when we get into that, you guys who have not seen that video, maybe that'll help you guys out if you're doing an installation. It'll cause you some vibrations and premature failure of your discs if you don't do it that way. Because you want to be sure that the engine is perfectly square in there and also in the right position as far as that goes. But we are ready. This is ready to go in. Again, Roger, thank you very, very much for the opportunity to get the adapter from you. We've got this one meshed in really, really well and really tight, so we shouldn't be drawing anything into the engine from around this. I made sure that I cut smaller when taking that out, and I guess now all we got to do is start wrenching on the tractor itself. So that'll happen in part 3. If you guys enjoyed this little bit of it, let me know, because this is the most important part of swapping this engine into one of these old Simplicity tractors. The wiring's not all that complicated. It's pretty much just chasing wires and making sure, but when we get to that point, I will certainly be going through and showing you guys. All we're going to be doing is taking our key switch. See if I can drag one out of here. Okay, we're going to be taking our key switch, and our key switch has 2 positions. We have an on position and a start position. One of the wires is going to come into the solenoid switch to activate the solenoid switch. Another wire is going to be a kill wire that will shut the engine off, which will mount to this tab here. Really quite simple of a setup. And then the solenoid switch, one will go to the battery, the other one will have a lead coming down to the starter. It's basically that simple to get this engine to run in any machine. Key switch, knowing which of the contacts are which can be done with a simple ohm meter or continuity tester. having your solenoid switch, or if you're going old school, a push button. And then the only other wiring that you have to do on this particular one, here is a solenoid wire. That will be wired into the on position of the key switch, right there, right there. And then this red wire coming out of here is a single wire going to the battery to keep the battery charged up. That's it for this engine. 2 wires. One for the solenoid, well, 3 wires. 4 wires, sorry. You have your solenoid wire, which will open the solenoid. You will have your kill wire, which they've conveniently mounted a stud right there for you. You can put a spade on or an eyelet and physically attach the wire to it so it's permanent. Solenoid, your anti-backfire solenoid, charge, and battery cable. This is the only heavy cable. The rest of these cables can be 12 AWG, 14 AWG. 10 is a little bit overkill, but 14 or 12 would be just fine for these. And this, of course, here is your regulator rectifier. Your alternator is up underneath the housing. So that's it. These 2 pieces are going to take the place of whatever's in there. This is a brand new solenoid. It has been tested. In fact, this is a solenoid that I used to bench run this engine, and it's a very heavy duty automotive solenoid that will last longer than probably, and there's another thing, it's real hard to find. You guys can read that right there. Can you read that? Made in USA. Okay, this is an old Ford, new old stock, 12 volt starter solenoid. That will last for decades and decades and decades. Made to last, not made in Mexico or Japan or China or any place else. All right, enough babbling. You guys have seen it here. We've got this thing ready to install. And like I said, part 3 is going to be engine extraction and dropping this one in. And we may even fire it up and take her for a quick ride after we get this little guy in there. So you guys stay tuned for that. This is Zippo. I will see you on the next one. I promise. Thumbs up, please.